Hey, good to see you. My name is Jonathan Foust. This is a webcast, and it's good to have you here. Let's see. We've got an old talk, which I'd like to introduce after a short meditation. It's really on an important topic, which is why practice? Why are we doing this? I find it a really helpful question from time to time because um, there are times when your practice just gets hard, when it gets dry, when it gets rote. How do you keep it alive? That's what we're talking about here. So, anyway, I'm glad you're here. And in the following meditation, I'll try to make it engaging. Before that, just quickly, thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this, to our producer, Glenn Harrison, to Rita Moran, our mindful movement leader. Thank you for all you do. You can get the link for Rita's mindful movement class on my website and Facebook page. I've got a newsletter if you're interested, a monthly, mostly, and a weekly. Got it, and this is all offered freely, so no one is denied access to these practices. Anyone is interested, and if you'd like to support this, as always, thank you for your support. And finally, we are in the countdown to the deadline for the Year of Living Mindfully program, which is an amazing year-long practice on sustaining attention on mindfulness and on compassion. It's a juicy thing. You might want to check it out. DC based. However, there is an online component. It's full, it's rich, it's transformative. This is the 11th year that I'm offering it. Without further ado, let's um, let's take a look at what it means to be present. If you like, you can close your eyes or let your eyes be with a soft gaze and take a few moments just to notice what's happening right now. Is there anything in the foreground of your experience that catches your attention? And a few questions about whatever this may be. Can you let it be? Can you hold this without any kind of judgment whatsoever? You might bring your attention to your breath, and we'll explore one of the most important doorways to practice, which is arriving in the senses, which can be most effectively drawn into your consciousness by deep relaxation. And can you sense right now, from the inside out, a smoothing of your forehead? If you bring your attention to the little muscles around your eyes, is it possible to soften the muscles around the eyes right now? And can you feel from the inside out the muscles of your face? And just scanning through all the little micro muscles of your face, let your face become expressionless and just track this sense of relaxation and letting go. Could you relax your tongue? Let your tongue fill your lower jaw. And is it possible to let your jaw relax and soften, letting the gap between the upper teeth and the lower teeth widen a little bit? Can you feel from the inside out the space inside your throat? Can you feel from the inside out the weight and the length of your arms? Can you sense the volume of your hands and the perception of any pulse or tingling or vibration in the palms and fingers and thumbs? Can you feel the space inside your lungs as your body breathes? Can you perceive the pulse, the beating of your heart? Can you feel or imagine the space between your navel and your spine? Is it possible to feel and to soften the hip joints and the floor of the pelvis? Can you feel from the inside out the weight and the volume and the length of your legs? Can you feel or imagine the volume of your feet? Feeling the tops of the feet and the toes and the soles of the feet and the heels. And as you sense from the crown of your head down to the soles of the feet, as you sense the outline of your body, is there anything right now on the inside that could relax or soften or let go? From this place of receptivity, you might guide your attention to where you feel the breath the most predominant on the inside, or perhaps to the sound vibrations around you, or perhaps to the felt sense of pulse or tingling in the palms and fingers. And for these next few minutes, let your attention rest here as best you can. The direct experience of the breath or sound vibration or the felt sense in the palms. When you notice the mind lost in thought, you might slow this down a little bit. Let this be perhaps a moment of mild celebration. You are again awake. And then guide your attention back to this felt sense of the body. What could soften? What could relax? Let there be a sense of pleasure in re-arriving back again to the breath or sound vibrations or sense of pulse or tingling in the palms. You might notice that there is a quality of effort in this practice of re-arriving. You might explore just as an invitation to let the effort fall away. Let the anchor of breath or sound or the felt sense in the palms fall away and just sense what it's like to rest in a quality of effortlessness. In the absence of trying to make anything happen over this next minute, what do you feel? What do you notice? What happens all by itself? Deepening your breath now. Just notice the quality of presence. You might gently let your body move and shift, sensing what has changed over the last minutes of practice. There's a little trick that I use when my practice feels dry or rote. I don't remember this all the time, but when I do, it's helpful. I ask myself, why? Why am I practicing? Something about the why kind of opens up the emotions, the limbic system, reminds me why I am actually pausing consciously, why I'm bringing my attention consciously to the here and now, present moment awareness, why I'm trying to cultivate this sense of non-judging awareness, and why I'm opening into presence and effortless awareness as best I can. And the why changes. Sometimes it's just stress reduction. Sometimes it's a sincere sense of wanting to see more clearly into the nature of reality itself. Sometimes it's my body just saying, hey, stop, I need a break. But the why is so critical. In the following talk, we talk about why practice and a little bit about what to expect if you stay with this practice. I've been at this for like over 50 years and I keep I keep going. And we'll talk about this a little bit in the following talk. All the best to you. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you find this following talk helpful. So, welcome back. So, who felt some kind of a shift in that 30 minutes? A little more relaxed, perhaps? You know, for me, there's something just kind of miraculous about the practice. Every time I meditate, I'm usually glad I did it. You know, I've never had an experience in meditation where I've thought, you know, I really shouldn't have done that. There's so many intangibles to this practice. Over this meditation, we did some concentration practice, some of the willful breathing. You may have found that to sort of calm the mind a little bit by giving the mind something to do. I think of meditation sometimes as a good metaphor is if you're training a puppy how to sit. You say to your puppy, sit, and the puppy has no idea what you're talking about. So you push your bottom to the ground and say, sit, and she looks at you adoringly and runs off immediately. So you find the puppy, you bring the puppy back, you say, sit, and again the puppy runs off. So you can train a puppy by whacking it with a newspaper if it moves, and I don't think anyone would agree you get a very healthy puppy out of that. Or you can understand that's the nature of puppy. And with patience and persistence, the puppy will begin to sit for longer and longer periods of time. It's the same thing with our minds. You're telling the mind, sit. The mind goes, oh, sure, yeah, this will be good for me. I'd be really glad to. Really glad to be here. Boom, you're off. And we can beat ourselves up, or we can understand this is the nature of the mind. As Ramana Maharshi said, the mind is a drunken monkey stung by scorpions. You know, it's wild. It's kind of out of control. So using a concentration practice can be very beneficial because you're giving the puppy, it's like you're throwing a stick for the puppy. So you're saying to your mind, okay, we're going to breathe in slowly to the count of 5. We're going to breathe out slowly to the count of 5. It gives your mind something to concentrate on, and the result can be a sense of gathering your attention, which can be very, very beneficial. And then the calling the mind back. How many times did your mind wander? It's hard to count because it's pretty gonzo and shameless. But the miracle is that somehow in this dream of thought, you wake up. That there's something in your awareness that can actually recognize when you are lost in thought. That is a miracle. The fact that we are aware at all. And every time you recognize that you're lost in a thought form, every time you recognize that, you're reinforcing the sense of who you are as the observer, or who you are as not the thought. And that is tremendously powerful. In some traditions, it's really described as you're releasing a little bit of stress, you're releasing a little bit of identification, and reinforcing this sense of identifying with awareness itself. And so the result is, perhaps, you feel a little more calm, feel a little less reactive, maybe a little more creative. Maybe intuition is a little bit more present. Maybe your physiology has settled in a certain way. And then you can't measure the consequence of that. If you go home tonight and you have a difficult phone call, maybe you'll be a little bit less reactive. And then you change a whole chain of reaction out there. It's pretty powerful stuff. And I'm really glad that it's in my life. I'm also aware that it's very hard to keep a practice going. Has anyone noticed that? To keep a meditation practice going in your life? It's really, really hard. Maintaining consistency. Pretty much every morning I have a thought. And the thought is, I should meditate. That's followed immediately by another thought, which is, I hate meditation. When I can manipulate myself into practicing, somewhere along the lines I think, I love meditation, I should do this more often. It's a very powerful dynamic that we know is good for us, and yet it's so hard to practice. An analogy one of my teachers used is that any time you practice mindfulness, or any time you practice this non-judging awareness, it's like you're putting money in your checking account. So you have some mindfulness in your checking account as a result of this 30-minute meditation. A little bit less reactive, a little more calm, a little more creative, perhaps. Maybe not, but perhaps. And then you start sort of spending on your checking account. You've got some clarity, some mental clarity. You've got, some wholesome qualities of maybe come out of this, maybe not necessarily. But then we go out and we spend it. Then we realize we're depleted. We've actually gone into a deficit. And something of us thinks, oh my God, I need to do something to bring myself back in balance. So the question is, how can you sort of design your life in a way where you're continually putting more into your checking account? So you're building more and more reserves, more and more resilience in your life. And one of the reasons why I love teaching this is I keep hearing what I most want to remember. And one of the reasons why it's great to be married to someone who also meditates is it's really good to have someone who will shame you into meditating. The power of community is very, very powerful. So finding a way to practice, to keep a regular practice, can be very beneficial, whatever that practice is. To find community or support for yourself, very, very important. And a third quality are times of intensive practice, when you can just step away from the busyness of your life and just sort of put it in neutral and do some different practices. They will inform you in a powerful way. So I wanted to talk a little bit tonight, with the time that we have, about a couple of factors that are a result of the practice, and how we can sort of keep investing into the practice. One point I'd like to make is that whenever you can remember why you're practicing, it will reignite your passion for the practice. It's very, very easy for a meditation practice or any yoga practice or whatever you might do that is to cultivate more awareness. It's very easy for it to become kind of rote, where you're not really engaging fully into it. Maybe you've noticed this. I've noticed this with the metta practice, the meditation of loving kindness, where you might be repeating certain phrases, and it very, very quickly becomes very formulaic, sort of disengaged. So I'll find myself sometimes doing the phrases, may you be happy, may you know peace, and so forth. And I'll find myself kind of doing it, just going through the gymnastics, May you be happy, may you know peace, may you be free from suffering, may you find ease in all things. And we're disconnected from it. We sit because we know it's good for us, the mind is busy. So remembering why. And the other morning, when I was dragging myself to my meditation practice, I was resisting it like I oftentimes do. I'm not a natural contemplative. And I asked myself that question, why? Why am I doing this? Because it takes time. There are other things I could be doing that are a lot more entertaining than just watching my internal process. And I thought, I'm doing this so I can feel more awake, so I can be more alive in my life. And I remember that I really do want to be awake. Suddenly, it felt more alive to me. So it's an important question to ask yourself. Why do you meditate? There are lots of reasons why. It might be for the physiological benefit. It's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this practice will improve the quality of your physiology. Maybe you just want to be less reactive. Maybe you're going through a challenging time and you want to unplug. Maybe you're wanting to be more creative, find more balance in your life. Maybe you're just sensing how you're just sort of programmed and reactive. There's something in you that wants to find a little more freedom where it wasn't there before. When you can remind yourself why you're practicing, it'll bring you right back to a sense of home. Whenever you engage in the meditation, I know I've talked about this before, the immediate byproduct is meditator's guilt. The sense that you're not practicing often enough or deep enough and so forth. And it's helpful to remember that's part of the package. That while you're practicing non-judging awareness, you will use this as an opportunity to judge yourself. It's crazy how that works. But remembering that's the dynamic of the mind. The mind is designed to compare and judge and try to figure things out. It's also helpful sometimes to reflect on whatever benefit you've experienced from your practice. Again, whatever form it may be. And sometimes we hit plateaus. And sometimes we're kind of wanting a breakthrough. And I found great comfort in Pema Chodron, who's been meditating for 90 years. I don't know how old she is now. But she said that she's never had a breakthrough in her life. She's really jealous of hearing other people who have breakthroughs and would love to have a breakthrough, but has never had one. But she looks back over her life and she recognizes that she's less reactive. She's less driven by greed, she's less driven by fear, she's less confused. So to look back and really reflect on what have you received as a byproduct of your practice can be very reinforcing in a powerful way. So one thing to remember in your practice and in your life, we can see life as practice, is that when you learn to recognize what is here, you develop wisdom. It's a natural byproduct, the capacity to recognize what's here. It's a major component of any meditation practice. What is this? There's a very interesting element of meditation practice in some traditions. It's called labeling or noting, where you actually label your experience as it's arising. Oh, thinking. Oh, emotion. Sensation. There's a friend of mine who told me about his time at a retreat. This is years ago, back when I lived in an ashram. He was on a long meditation retreat, and he was developing really intense knee pain. And he decided that he was going to do this labeling technique. And he was just going to label or note mentally what was happening with the sensations in his knee. And so it went something like this, where he said, this feels like pain. This feels like I'll never walk again. This feels like red hot pain. This is white hot pain. These are waves of pain. Waves of pain across the fruited plain. America, America. And then he sort of like snapped to, and then he checked back in with his knee, and the pain was gone. That's not a guarantee that that'll happen. But there is an interesting byproduct when you can name your experience as it's happening. You'll begin to recognize a fundamental characteristic of reality, which is impermanence. You begin to recognize that what you're naming is changing. Maybe not as rapidly as his description of his knee pain, but you begin to reinforce who you are as this sense of the observer. And an interesting thing is you begin to recognize that when you're naming what's true, that there are actually levels of what is true. And the investigation takes you deeper and deeper into what's actually there. Not your story, not your embellishment, but what's actually there. And the byproduct of that is wisdom. So let's do a little reflection, if you will. If you like, you can close your eyes. So we'll take stock of your internal experience right now. You might imagine a meter that runs from 1 to 10, with 1 being minimum and 10 being maximum. Right now, what would you say is your hunger level on a scale of 1 to 10? What is your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10? How would you rate on a scale of 1 to 10 your emotional well-being right now? How would you rate on a scale of 1 to 10 your mental clarity right now? How would you rate the degree of your contentment right now? So when you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. One of my teachers from India, when he went back to India at the end of his life to die, was asked, what's the highest quality of a spiritual seeker? And his response surprised me. I thought he'd say, whatever you're enjoying, stop it right now. Knuckle down, work harder. But he said the highest quality of a spiritual seeker is self-observation without judgment. That's such a critical part of any transformational practice, of your capacity to recognize what's here without judgment. So just in that reflection, of gauging your hunger level, your energy level, there's a very interesting process that happens. You're doing an internal self-assessment, but you're also reinforcing a very interesting element, which in some traditions is called the witness. The witness is your capacity to be that observer, observing without judgment. And it becomes a very powerful tool. Your capacity to be with anything is directly related to your capacity to be the witness. As soon as you identify, then we get into trouble. We identify with our emotions, we identify with our beliefs, and it's very hard to kind of extract ourselves from there. So this practice of recognizing, of labeling, self-observation without judgment is a powerful, freeing practice. The more you can do this, the more you can recognize as the witness that you are not your thoughts, that the thought forms are passing through. Some of them you can observe and like they're just coated with Teflon. Oh, that's not my thought. Some, of course, have Velcro, and they adhere. So this capacity of recognizing, of naming what's here, the byproduct is wisdom, to recognize what's true. And in Buddhist psychology, that's 50% of the equation there, wisdom. And that leads to the other half of the equation. And that is, as you learn to accept and allow, you become more and more compassionate. And the question here is, whatever is present, can you let this be? Can you be with it? One characteristic of reality is that everything is changing. The second characteristic of reality is your relationship to what is changing has direct impact on how much you will suffer. How you're relating to your experience depends on how much you'll suffer. The wonderful equation I've shared before, that P times R equals S, is very helpful here. That pain times resistance equals suffering. You can be in a lot of pain with minimal resistance and have minimal suffering. Doesn't mean you don't feel pain, but you're not necessarily adding more to it than what's there. And you can have minimal pain with a lot of resistance and suffer a huge amount. So I think it's so well illustrated by the study of our relationship to death, which was done by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross so long ago, the 5 stages of death, which really are about your physical death, but also anything that you're holding on to. The kind of 5 classic stages we go through. I was reflecting on this in relationship with my father, who has gone through quite a process from being a very active, bright, witty English professor and moving into dementia and into Alzheimer's, and kind of watching his process through these steps. The first step we experience is denial. And for him, he was denying that he was having a problem, even though increasingly he would become lost when he would drive to the barbershop, or he would not go through periods of not remembering where the house was. Then The next stage we often move into is anger. And when we kind of made the shift of recognizing that as a family we couldn't support him anymore, we moved him into an Alzheimer's unit. It was very painful because he would have periods of lucidity. And I went to visit him once, and I had never seen him so angry. Where he said, I am a college professor. I have things to do with my life. And in those moments of lucidity, it was a justified anger. It was incredibly painful. But his lucidity didn't last for too long. The next stage we moved through was bargaining. And for my father, he started to say, well, I'll help out while I'm here. There's some really damaged people here, until I figure out how to get out of here. So he kind of went through a bargaining phase. And then the next stage is depression. I sense that I'll never get out. And you could see his spirits just sort of drain. And then eventually on to the acceptance phase. And this is, of course, in part with his mental deterioration. But more of a sense of just sort of relaxing into the experience, of kind of welcoming visitors when they're there, and when they left, not resisting. But this is something we all move through. Whenever we experience something that we don't want to let go of. First the denial, and then the anger, and the judgment, the blame, and then into the bargaining phase, and then the sense of depression, and then ultimately finding a place into acceptance. Meditation has been described as dying while alive, which is one of the reasons why I don't like to meditate. When we sit down with an intention of recognizing that part of the fruit of this practice is wisdom and compassion, the capacity to recognize what's true, and the capacity to be with it, the capacity to let go. When you sit in meditation, of course, what you realize is that everything that's between you and feeling free is fair game. And it will find its way to you. And it requires kind of an extraordinary attitude to embrace a transformational practice. There is certainly a quality of meditation where you will feel better, you'll feel more alive, you'll feel more vibrant. But at the same time, you will feel stronger emotions. You will feel the unprocessed parts of your life that inevitably find their way into your awareness. And it takes a certain rigor to stay with it. One of my teachers said that people stop practicing precisely because it's working. And that's kind of a hard thing to take on when you realize that the resistance you experience is an incredible opportunity. That there's something on the other side of that resistance that will have something to do with insight or new possibilities where you didn't see them before. So what this means is that it takes a tremendous amount of effort to do this practice by yourself. And why there have been communities and monasteries and ashrams and support groups through time immemorial. Because this is a practice, as the Buddha described it, as swimming upstream. You're swimming against your own conditioning, all of your fears, all of your anxieties, all of your personal programming. But more than that, and the Buddha made specific reference to this 2,500 years ago, you're swimming against the culture. Because you've probably noticed that this culture is not interested in slowing down. The culture is pretty much around, if you feel pain, We have an amazing array of medications that'll make that pain go away. And if you keep getting more things, you'll be happier. I think I've shared before that there are really no material things that will truly make you happy other than a few selected Apple products. So wisdom reveals impermanence. You recognize everything is going to change. Everything that comes out of causes and conditions is going to fall away. That's incredibly valuable, but it's the compassion piece that actually allows you to let go, to be with it. So what comes from here is an arising of the fruit of the practice. And in Buddhist psychology or Buddhist philosophy, it's called bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is the awakening of wisdom and compassion. It's a very challenging practice to keep your heart open, but also to keep wisdom alive. Finding that balance is really challenging. I'd like to take just a couple minutes before we close to talk a little bit about that balance. One of my best friends from college was telling me how when he was a kid, like a teenager, and he was starting to date, and he'd go to pick up a girl, the father inevitably would sort of take him to the side and say, "Look, I know what you're up to, and I'm watching you." And he would always be, just, screw you, And with 4 daughters, he realized now he's the guy saying, "Hey, look, come here, I want to talk to you. I'm watching, I heard a great line, by the way, if you do have any daughters. This is a comedian was saying that he got the perfect line to keep young men in line. He says, what he'll do is he'll take the young man aside who's coming to date his daughter, and he'll say, "Look, I know what you're up to, I know what you want, and I just want to tell you, I have no problem going back to prison." One of my friends was sharing how his daughter kept getting involved with the wrong kind of person over and over and over again. And he was really struggling between, do I let her learn from her own experience, or do I try and make a correction? And that is really this balance of compassion and wisdom. The example that I've talked about before is if you see a teenager fall in love for the first time, their heart is going to be ripped to shreds, but you wouldn't take that experience away because that's part of the human journey. So you can actually have your heart open, and you can recognize what is true. You can recognize kind of the law of karma. So this experience of bodhicitta, of the awakening of wisdom and compassion, is not a doctrine. It's really a state of mind. It's not emotional love, it's not attached love, but it's a quality of compassion and the understanding of karma, how cause and effect. That while we can hold compassion for another person, we recognize that we each have our own lessons to learn, and that the suffering that each one of us experiences is a growth opportunity. In that same way that you don't overcome anger by suppressing it, that you only overcome anger by naming it, by allowing it, by investigating it, by sensing the unmet need under the anger, that's where the healing arises. So there's a wonderful quote from Pema Chodron that I'd like to share. It's rather long, but it's a wonderful way of looking at this bodhicitta and how we can bring it into our lives. And you might like to close your eyes for this, just because it's a little bit long and It's got some sweetness to it. Here's what she says. Spiritual awakening is frequently described as a journey to the top of a mountain. We leave our attachments and our worldliness behind and slowly make our way to the top. At the peak, we transcend all pain. The only problem with this metaphor is that we leave all the others behind. Our drunken brother, our schizophrenic sister, our tormented animals and friends. Their suffering continues, unrelieved by our personal escape. In the process of discovering bodhicitta, a word that means noble or awakened heart, the journey goes down, not up. It's as if the mountain pointing toward the center of the earth instead of reaching into the sky. Instead of transcending the suffering of all creatures, we move toward the turbulence and doubt. We jump into it. We move toward it however we can. We explore the reality and unpredictability of insecurity, of pain, and we try not to push it away. It takes years. It takes lifetimes. We let it be as it is. At our pace, without speed or aggression, we move down and down and down. With us move millions of others, our companions in awakening from fear. At the bottom, we discover water, the healing water of bodhicitta. Right down there in the thick of things, we discover the love that will not die. So there's a quality here that the flowering of our practice ends up being generosity, ends up being kindness, and it ends up being compassion. Recognizing that just as you wish to be happy, so do all beings. And just as you want to be safe from inner and outer harm, so do all beings want to be safe from inner and outer harm. Just as you want to experience inner peace, so do all beings. And just as you wish to be free from suffering, so do all beings. So why don't we close with a short meditation? You might bring your attention to your breath. And you might like to explore, again, just for maybe a few rounds of breath, this long, slow inhalation and a relaxed and surrendered exhalation. And with each breath out, just sensing what might relax, what might soften, what might let go. And you might reflect on what are referred to as the immeasurables, the four immeasurable states of kindness, compassion, of joy and equanimity. And if you like, we'll reflect on these phrases. You might either repeat them internally or just contemplate the phrase. And you might also explore if you can locate the resonance or what these phrases feel like on the inside. Just as I wish to be happy, may all beings be happy. Just as I wish to know inner peace, May all beings know this inner peace. And just as I wish to be safe from inner and outer harm, may all beings be safe. Just as I wish to be free from suffering, may all beings know this freedom. In these final moments, you might reflect on why you are drawn to this practice, whatever your practice may be. Your capacity to name what is true leads to wisdom. Your capacity to allow, to accept, leads to compassion. And reflecting on who you are in the absence of fear, in the absence of anxiety, in the absence of grasping, in the absence of aversion, is this infinite ocean of kindness, of compassion, and joy. You might draw in a long, deep inhalation and exhale with a sigh. And as you're ready, gently deepening the breath and letting your eyes open. Thank you for your kind attention. A few quick announcements. The parking lot is done. Yay. This driveway, I understand, is now open permanently, so full access to the facility here. If you're interested, we talked a couple weeks ago about the spiritual friends groups, and I know that a couple groups have formed. If you're interested in joining one of these groups, there's still time. You can go to the IMCW website and look for the link for spiritual friends, and you send an application and Glenn will get back to you and try to connect you with the group. And for those of you who aren't familiar, these are groups that meet usually once a month for meditation and for some kind of structured sharing. It's just a great way to kind of cultivate some good friendship and also create a little accountability. That can be very, very helpful as well. On December 5th, if you're interested, I'm going to be giving a talk at the Kaplan Clinic on meditative strategies for working with pain and depression. So that's on my website if you're interested as well. If you'd like to be on the mailing list, you can sign up. And as always, thank you for your generous support for the church and IMCW and me and my lavish lifestyle. It's great to be back. I'll be back again next week. I believe we have tea. We do have tea. If you like tea and cookies, they are available out there. If you have any questions about the Spiritual Friends groups or anything like that, I'll be around as well. So thank you, and may you and your wisdom and compassion have a wonderful evening together.